Hey legends, it's Warnie here, taking a look at something very special on our Patreon. This is the fantasy kit for 2024. We had a great edition of that last year, and Jaiden has gone another step further. Jaiden, thanks for joining us, mate.
Thanks, Warnie. Yeah, great to be here, and hopefully the things I've put together prove very useful over the next few weeks as the preseason really kicks into gear.
Well, let's get into it. So this is what you get when you open up the front page or the first page of the spreadsheet. And sitting here on Tim English, we might as well start with him. Then what do we see on this page here that are helpful for fantasy coaches?
Yeah, so first up, you can type in that box any player you want. You can, if you don't know how to spell their name, just start typing, and it'll come up if you hit the little drop down box. And that's all the players available for 2024. The main things that pop up are pretty much their details for this season, a price stat, an ownership percentage that was a few days ago, so it shouldn't be too far out of date. And yeah, their position, and then we've got the season averages. So just a quick overview of like what they did each year, how many games they played. I find that pretty useful just to have that instead of
Colours
having
are
like,
pretty as well.
yeah, I find that pretty useful. Like just from building this, I use it a lot more than what I
Yeah.
thought, because like the way I work with things, I don't typically use spreadsheets. I typically use actual software, and it gets a bit finicky sometimes. But having it all in one place, it's just really amazing. So
Nice.
yeah, season averages, games they've played, their centre bounce percentage for the year. So yeah, you can see English in 2021 when he shared the ruck, around 50-50 for the centre bounce and ruck contest. So that's the kind of things that you like to look at from a season point of view. And then I've just filtered the last 3 years of games and just chucked them all in with some game stats, so you can kind of have a little bit of a look at what they did maybe in the back half of the year, or if they had a role change, things like that. Obviously, for English, he was the number one scorer, so he's pretty consistent. So yeah, just the last 3 years are all there. Who they played against and what they scored, time on ground, points per minute, and the centre bounce for that game. And then I've put in my little score sources thing that I've
This
been
is
working
sweet.
on. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited about that. So essentially what it is where players are scoring their points from. So Tim English is a ruck, so he's going to be scoring a lot of points from hitouts and stoppages. That's there. And then the other two are like what I like to call transition play, where it's like if you win the ball back in defence on turnover, or start it off with a kick in. And then just some basic match stats, so you get a bit of an idea about what they did well in that game.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it's great to be looking into. So we've had a look at English. Let's have a look at another player. What about Jaiden Young? We've been talking about defenders today. So what do we get here? Jaiden Young, he pops up. Yep, there he is. It's all worked. I've been able to spell his name correctly, and it's all in there. So there he is. We can see, last couple of years, 89 averages. So you can look at that and the games played. And you see the CBAs in that one went up to 16%, and we're probably expecting that to go even a little bit higher. But kick-ins were still there. He was taking a fifth of those because he's taken 25% of those. So what are some things that you might like to look at with a Jaiden Young when you're researching him for your fantasy preseason study?
Yeah, so I've been doing a bit of this lately. So we've got kind of a player that had a massive role change. And when I look for that, I want to see if we've got an obvious role change with the centre bounces going up, but I want to break it down a bit more and say, is Jaiden Young scoring as a midfielder, or is he still scoring as a defender? So if you have a look at the score sources, the last 5 games, he was, a fair chunk higher than what he was going in the first half of the year. So I think 55 average from stoppages
Yeah.
in that last 5 games, which is what we love to see, because it means he'll be able to score, and you can just like click and drag to highlight the cells. It makes it really easy. So yeah, he was averaging 18 stoppage points until he moved into the mids, where he bumped it up to 55. So that's a massive amount of upside he's got there. And then you can compare whether his transition points dropped off, which they did a little bit, but yeah, we want players to have that floor, consistency, things like that. So that's kind of how I've been using it, breaking down players' seasons and whether they had a role change.
Epic. All right. Well, so that's the front page. We'll click through the other tabs that we've got. So players down the bottom. Obviously, fairly obvious here, I guess. What we've got there is each player, team, age, which is always very nice, especially if you're looking at your keeper staff, position, prices. They're priced at figure, which is great to see. Ownership percentage. So I guess that's some raw data there to help coaches.
Yeah, definitely. And it's sometimes a little bit tricky to get a spreadsheet with everything in it from the fantasy website. So, yeah, right there. If you want to have a play with it, you can customize this as much as you want.
In the games column, so that's actually a record of games.
Yeah, so this populates the recent games on the front page. And I guess what you can use this for is just to analyze maybe what happened in different games if you're wanting to filter and say, yeah, in the grand final here. So Oscar McInerney didn't actually score any transition points. So, like Cox and Cameron, as a Pies fan, they must have shut him down a bit. So, things like that, you can look through different games, maybe just filter for a team and see what happened when, say, Hayden Young went into the midfield, who dropped off, things like that.
Yeah, cool. So that's plenty of stuff there, and that's from the last 3 years as well. So lots of
Yeah.
ways to go that we won't explore too hard because that's, guess what everyone's job is. In the seasons, we get basically averages and some other information for seasons.
Yeah, so if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you got Pendle starting off in 2006. But
Wow,
yeah, we've got
look how
everything
many
in there,
rows there are here.
all the season averages, centre bounce percentages. They can be a bit tricky to find if you're looking for maybe someone like Jack McRae, where like you want to know what he was in the centre bounces, at the start in his prime of his career, 2019, 2018, taking it back. So things like that. You can take a look at that role and how it's changed over that career.
So are you picking McRae in your team this year?
I still don't have him. I think everyone's kind of getting around the idea now of having nothing in the forward line.
I know. I
So
think that's probably the key, isn't it, at the moment? That's where we're thinking. But yeah, there's Jack McRae on that at the moment. You can see what he's done since that 2013. And Jesus, some big fantasy averages. Pretty crazy. I think
yeah,
we've reeled this stat off quite a few times though. But that 92 average that he's at this season, the price that's his lowest since his debut. Pretty crazy. All right, now this column here, this tab I love a lot, and this is the worthwhile one. I might just scroll over to your blurb. Basically, well, you can put it in your own words if you like, and people can read it as well. What is a worthwhile average? What's this all about?
yeah. I thought I needed to chuck a little bit of an explanation on there, but essentially, I asked the question last year to myself. All of these questions I have for my own team, and it turns out they work out all right for people doing research themselves. So I asked the question, how much upside does a player need if I'm going to pick them? So we often talk about, maybe a player needs 10 points of upside, maybe they need 20, but there's no actual way to numerically solve for that. And the issue is that if you're picking Marcus Bontempelli, you don't really need him to average 10 points more because he's already going at 117. So if he maintains that for the whole year, you probably want to start him. But then we look at someone like mid price, maybe like George Wardlaw. He averaged 65-ish last year. We need a bit more upside out of him to have a second year breakout. So I think his worthwhile average is around 92. So we're essentially talking about what's the average where the player becomes a great pick, someone you need to own. So if you think any of these players on this list can hit that average, you have to start with them, pretty much, is what I'm saying. So if you think Bontempelli can go 116.6, you should start with him.
Wow.
And if you think Wardlaw can have that second year breakout and hit 92, you should start with him. And it goes right down to the rookies, but it's a bit more relevant for the keepers. The longer you keep a player, the more relevant this worthwhile average thing is, because it's mainly to do with points. I'm not really considering cash generation. There's a bunch of other things that come into consideration when you're building your team, but at the end of the day, the points win the car. So it's got to be, in a way where you're measuring what they need to average to be worthwhile. And this is just trained off the last 10 years of prices and positions. So it's scaled by that price, obviously, but then there's also a position offset. So it gives you an indication of forward status is pretty valuable and defender status is pretty valuable. So someone like Nick Dacos, he's like, what, over 100 grand more than his brother.
Yeah.
But they have this same worthwhile average because Nick has defender status and Josh is a mid only. So defender status is worth a fair bit. And, it's kind of a way to just have a bit of a number in your head of how much upside someone needs.
So how do you feel about like a Nick Dacos then? I guess the buy's a really weird part of this whole season as well. How are you feeling just for your own team at the moment?
Yeah, pretty good. I wrote about him in the deck of DT, and I did this after I wrote that, and I said if he can go at 108 again, then like he's going to be a smash pick
Mm.
as a defender. So it's a little bit lower than that. 106.7 here is the worthwhile. And yeah, I'm pretty keen on him. But with that buy, what I've added into the spreadsheet is just a buy adjustment column.
Yep.
Pretty much all that's doing is the complete the complete adjustment of saying, look, they're playing one less game.
This is one game,
So
yeah.
they're going to have to average what they would do in one less game. You can kind of come up with your own, so Clayton Oliver's at the top. He's a 115 to a 120 with the buy. If you can cover around half of his average, maybe with like a 60 as your 19th best player, you can cover him. You can maybe just nudge that back down halfway in between, say at 117, 118, and be like, yeah, I think he can do that. So it kind of depends which one you want to think about more, how much you think you can cover that player. So I've added that buy adjustment on there as well.
So awesome. There's so much to think about here, and I guess what is brilliant is how well this is laid out. So thanks, Jaiden, for making this nice and easy for us all to be able to use. And it is pure data, and I think that's what is really cool about this. We can all have our little gut feels and all that sort of stuff, but if that can be backed up by your data, or some of even our decisions can be based purely on this because we go, well, that's better than Calvin just thinking, oh yeah, no, he'll be better this year. This is some of the stuff that we can be using to think about, and nice historical stuff too. And like you said, with this worthwhile stuff, that's the last 10 years, and it is trained on it, as you say. So when you say by trained on it, it's pulling that data and seeing what we've seen over the last decade.
Yeah, exactly right. And yeah, I'm pretty keen on it. It might seem a little bit too high. You might think, I don't think my players can do that. But kind of think of it as more of the opposite of like, if the player does that, you're going to want to start them. Like, you're going to want to have them. Not so much, I'm starting this player, can they do this? It's more the other way around. And I'm probably going to put up a proper tweet to do with it soon to kind of talk through it a bit more.
Because that's it. Like, it's the ultimate sort of score that they need to score, or average, isn't it, over that time? It's not just exactly what they might do or what you're predicting them to do. If they do that, it's an absolute smash pick. But if they're a few points lower, it could still be an awesome selection.
Yeah, exactly right. And with the score sources stuff, I'm keen for people to get their hands on this and kind of use it. I've been putting a fair bit of stuff up to do with it, but I'm only one man and can't really put up things every single second of every day. But yeah, it's really have a look into that. I'm pretty keen on it, and things to do with like whether a player can maintain what they're doing. People like Liam Duggan and Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira averaged a lot of kick-in points. So if you think that's kind of not sustainable, maybe they regress a little bit. So it's things like that that really interest me to do with that, and I'm keen for you guys to tag me in it and find some things that might be relevant for your own team, because that's all I've been doing the last few months.
Yeah, well, that's it. You've got lots of stuff that you can do, and you can spend hours looking at this, and that's the stuff like Nasiah Wanganeen-Miller. I've just opened him up, and you can see those big scores in last season. He just really did have a nice little breakout for his second season, and can that continue on? And I guess that's where you can work that out, and you can make some of your own judgments from that stuff, because that's still a massive part of the game. It's what we don't know what's going to happen in the future, and that's part of our job as fantasy coaches to try to predict that. But if we can use some data, that can help. Jaiden, this is bloody awesome, mate. So thanks so much for this. The Patreon community definitely love this, and the whole fantasy community in general, being able to get your insights into things. So are you excited about this season? Do you feel like you're about to have another breakout yourself?
Oh yeah, I'm pretty keen. I think I just need to have that year where I'm kind of successful. I was in 2020, but I don't know if that really counts when people there's that massive break. But yeah, I'd love to have a really successful year. And for me, part of it is just I'm answering all these questions to do with my own team. Like, we have so many questions as fantasy coaches, and I want to bring people along for the ride and try and answer some of the more intricate questions in fantasy and see whether things are true or a myth or fact or fiction.
You're a genius, mate. We appreciate you. Thanks so much. You can check this out at patreon.com/DT Talk, and make sure you're hitting up at Jaiden_Popowski over on X, and also on Stats by Jaiden on Instagram. Any other places, but the key places, I guess?
Yeah, that's it. I'm trying to get the Instagram going a bit, but yeah, plenty to go there still.
Yeah, legend. All right, thanks, Jaden. Appreciate your time, and thanks so much for this epic resource.
Cheers, Warnie.